The crystal towers of New Valoria shimmered beneath the faint glow of 3 moons, as Administrator Veltar Moonwaver gazed at the heavens with rising dread. Shadows moved between the stars like predators circling a wounded beast. The Ravager Armada had arrived. Veltar's crystalline fingers shook as he activated the emergency transmitters. His people were visionaries, artists and scholars who had devoted lifetimes to shaping this peaceful colony at the edge of charted space. They had no armies beyond lightly trained guards, no weapons save for mining drills, and now, from the void, came ships forged for a single purpose: annihilation. The assault began without warning. Crimson lances of energy rained from orbit, reducing the northern research outpost to molten shards. Agonized cries filled every channel as Valorans rushed for shelters that could not save them. The colony's shield grids sputtered out under the relentless fire. Orbital defenses, satellites meant for deterrence, vanished in seconds. Built by beings who lived only for conquest, the Ravager fleet pressed its attack. Veltar initiated the emergency protocols, his lyrical voice resonating through space in the ancient Valoran tongue of distress. He pleaded for compassion, begged for aid from any civilization that could hear. Yet deep down he knew the truth: help would never come in time. Through the observation dome, the enemy descended, hulking void ships bristling with weapons, armored shells of darkness. These were the vessels of a species that enslaved for amusement and crushed worlds for sport. Until now, the Valorans had dismissed the rumors from frontier colonies. Now they learned those nightmares were real. Communications Officer Rendell staggered forward, crystalline tears streaming down her face. She had scoured the channels for any reply, but the silence carried worse news. 3 neighboring systems had already gone dark. The Ravagers weren't raiding. They were purging an entire sector. Veltar made his most desperate choice. He triggered the deep space beacon, broadcasting on forbidden channels, sending their cry into the quarantined zone of Sol 3, the fabled world of the Deathworlders. Every people knew the myths. A world so vicious it produced predators unrivaled. In the galaxy, a planet of storms, poisons, and endless peril. Its creatures had not only endured, but flourished. Legends claimed these Deathworlders once sought the stars, until they were driven back by an alliance of fearful races. Others believed they had chosen exile, sealing themselves away after realizing their own danger. Whatever the truth, warnings endured. Never seek Sol 3. Never disturb its denizens, and pray they remained imprisoned in their system. But desperation left no other path. As Ravager dropships scoured the crystal forests, Veltar cast his last plea into the abyss. He spoke of music, of art, of a people who created beauty in fragile peace. He begged the Deathworlders to remember not all species were enemies. The reply came swifter than thought. A transmission in no known tongue, yet its meaning imprinted directly onto the mind. Message received. Response inbound. Prepare for contact. Veltar stared at the comms display in disbelief. The signal had come from Sol 3, yet crossed impossible distance in an instant. How could the Deathworlders send thought faster than light itself? What kind of power did they command, possess in their sealed corner of space? Even more unsettling was the meaning of the reply. The Deathworlders had not offered refuge, nor evacuation. They spoke of no sanctuary, no medicine, no hope of safety. They had merely declared one thing: they were coming. The thought froze Veltar's crystalline frame. These beings were not sending aid. They were sending themselves. Above, the orbital firestorm grew fiercer as additional Ravager warships unleashed destruction. Gardens sculpted across centuries became infernos of plasma. Monuments carved to honor their ancestors crumbled into glowing shards. Within shelters, children sobbed while their parents sang in vain, voices drowned by the roar of ruin. Veltar watched his dream collapse in fire and ash. New Valoria had been his vision from youth, a sanctuary of art and science, free from the restrictions of the homeworlds. Now that vision was being erased by conquerors who mistook beauty for weakness. Ravager troops stormed down near the central settlement as orbital barrages shifted outward. Security feeds showed the monsters clearly, towering brutes sheathed in natural armor, their weapons grafted to flesh and bone. They advanced through crystalline streets like living engines of war, shattering everything in reach. Some dragged captured Valorans, their screams so sharp they distorted communication. Bands. Reports poured in from every district. The hydroponic farms were ablaze, the cultural halls reduced to rubble, the children's gardens desecrated as Ravager soldiers practiced slaughter for amusement. Within hours, centuries of valor and heritage would be dust. Then the sensors picked up something impossible. A lone vessel emerged from the direction of the Sol system. By galactic scale, it was tiny, no larger than a Valoran research craft, yet its design was alien. Smooth lines and angles arranged with some purpose no one could decipher. More impossible still, it flew at speeds beyond any ship larger than a fighter. Stranger yet, its approach vector was madness. Rather than skirting danger, it drove headlong for the heart of the Ravager armada, accelerating toward the densest cluster of ships. Veltar tried desperately to warn the intruder, but his transmissions met only static. Either their comms were broken, or the crew refused to respond. As the vessel pierced the Ravager formation's perimeter, Veltar braced to witness the obliteration of their last fragile hope. Instead, the unthinkable occurred. Ravager ships began erupting into fireballs. On the bridge of the Indomitable, Captain Dohyan studied the tactical readouts as the ship neared Valoran space. The situation was clear. 17 Ravager patrol craft formed a loose blockade around the system, while the main force hammered the colony world below, exactly the predatory hunting pattern described in xenobiology archives. His crew worked with focused calm. Weapons Officer Borum finalized defensive calibrations. Pilot Tae Min calculated trajectories that might prolong survival just enough to gauge the battlefield. Engineer Jin Woo monitored prototype systems with meticulous care, knowing a single error could scatter them into atoms. Contact came swiftly. 3 destroyers broke formation to intercept the human craft. Their ultimatum was blunt: surrender or die. No negotiation, no compromise. Typical doctrine. For a species that had conquered half the galaxy through terror and brute force. Doyan initiated response protocols. Borum's hands flew across controls engineered for encounters exactly like this. The Indomitable was not, by human measure, a warship, yet it had been built to withstand hostile contact, every circuit and system shaped by centuries of surviving things that wanted humanity extinct. The Ravagers fired first. Plasma beams and kinetic barrages tore across the void, optimized to shatter shields and batter defenses with raw might. Against most civilizations, such strikes spelled immediate defeat. But the Ravagers had never faced humans. At the helm, Tae Min hurled the Indomitable into a spiral so radical it seemed to violate physics. The vessel danced through the stars like something alive, twisting with gravitational flows and momentum in ways inconceivable to species born on stable worlds. What looked like wild evasion, what seemed like random weaving to the Ravagers, was in fact a precise maneuver, calculated to give the human ship every advantage. Borum waited until the enemy committed fully to their attack runs before answering. The Indomitable's armament was unlike the massive plasma batteries favored by galactic powers. Instead, it unleashed compact projectiles so fast that alien sensors could not even register them. Each slug carried enough kinetic energy to pierce starship plating as if it were glass. The first destroyer disintegrated before its crew even knew they were under fire. The second managed to raise shields, only to watch them shatter beneath impacts born of unfamiliar physics. The third tried to disengage, but found its path blocked by a vessel that moved like a predator evolved to stalk in the void. Communications. Officer Young-Soo established a shaky link with the Valoran colony, while Borum dispatched the last patrol ship. Distorted by the ongoing bombardment, the transmission was faint, but unmistakable. Crystalline beings of haunting beauty sang pleas for aid, their harmonics carrying emotions beyond human vocabulary. Captain Du-hyun felt something stir deep within him as he listened. These were a people who had spent centuries crafting art and knowledge, while his ancestors had been mastering the spear. They had built a civilization of music and poetry, while humanity had perfected survival through conflict. Now they were being slaughtered for that very innocence. Violence, Du-hyun realized, was sometimes the only shield against violence. He opened a direct channel to Administrator Moonwaver. His voice was steady, professional, giving no indication of the destruction his ship had just wrought. He requested tactical intelligence, enemy numbers, weapons, defenses. The questions baffled the Valorans, who had expected requests for evacuation routes or diplomatic overtures. Moonwaver answered with a trembling blend of hope and fear, speaking of his people's peace and inexperience with war. He offered data freely, yet struggled to understand why humans sought combat information instead of escape corridors. Meanwhile, Medic Yunji prepared the infirmary for potential casualties. Though trained in xenobiology, she had never treated a non-human under battle conditions. The crystalline physiology of the Valorans would demand improvisation, if any lived long enough to be saved. Engineer Jin Woo pored over sensor data from the last functioning Valoran satellites. Ravager warcraft, though formidable, showed signs of stagnation. Their designs were powerful but predictable, optimized for crushing surrendering foes, not for adapting against cunning resistance. Humanity, by contrast, had been forged on a death world where survival demanded constant innovation. Every system on the Indomitable, its weapons, engines, shields, was built with predators in mind, and its crew had been raised to think tactically, because failure meant extinction. The main fleet soon reacted to the loss of its patrols, shifting formation to meet the intruder. Over 200 ships appeared on Doyan's displays, from nimble fighters to towering cruisers. Any other commander would have fled, calling desperately for reinforcements. Most civilizations would have required an armada to even contemplate engagement, but Captain Du-hyun only activated full combat protocols and began his assault plan. Pilot Tammin plotted a daring course through the system's asteroid belt, using the debris as both shield and weapon. The maneuver would shatter the Ravager formation and force them into chaotic pursuit. Three-dimensional combat, a style humanity had mastered since Earth's earliest dogfights. Borum began setting firing solutions for targets still hours away. Precision was vital. Her weapons depended on perfect timing, not brute force. Human combat doctrine allowed no waste. One shot, one kill, no margin for error. The Valorans watched in awe as a lone vessel prepared to challenge a fleet hundreds of times its size. Their own people would have capitulated or begged for mercy, but the humans treated impossible odds as puzzles to solve. Young-Soo opened a secure channel to Earth Command, transmitting a concise status report. The reply arrived within minutes, encoded in protocols older than alien contact. Its contents were short, unmistakable, weapons-free, engage all hostiles, protect civilians. Du-hyun smiled grimly as he read the order. Earth had not dispatched diplomats or rescue shuttles. They had sent hunters to eliminate a predator. Soon, every being in the system would understand the difference. The Indomitable surged toward the core of the Ravager Armada, her crew bracing for the fight that had defined humanity since the dawn of their kind, when the first ape lifted a sharpened stick and chose to strike. Being prey was no longer acceptable. Warp Prime Kavar commanded the Ravager Armada from the bridge of his flagship, Bone Crusher, with the unshaken certainty of a predator untested by defeat. His kind had conquered more than 300 worlds through sheer firepower and ruthless doctrine. No civilization had ever mounted meaningful resistance. To him, the lone human vessel racing toward his fleet would be nothing more than another swift victory. He studied the tactical display with growing amusement. A single small craft charging into the heart of his formation? Madness. Or perhaps technology far beyond the galactic registry. Kavar assumed madness. Lesser species often flailed in futile gestures of defiance before submitting to fate. He ordered forward squadrons to intercept and capture. The crew would be enslaved, their ship dismantled, its secrets stripped for Ravager gain. The operation, like all before it, would follow routine. But then the anomaly appeared. The human ship began moving in ways that defied logic. Captain Doyan had initiated Deathworlder Protocol Omega, a doctrine crafted for hopeless encounters. The Indomitable twisted through the void like a living organism, exploiting gravitational eddies and momentum in patterns no Ravager pilot could comprehend. Tamman guided the craft into the asteroid belt with terrifying ease, skimming between rocks moving at orbital speeds while maintaining combat velocity and weapons lock. For him, it was skill refined through practice. To aliens raised on predictable worlds, it was sheer insanity. Ravager formations faltered as they tried to follow. Larger vessels broke ranks to navigate singly, losing coordination and exposing themselves to concentrated strikes. Warp Prime Kavar watched in fury as his ordered formation unraveled into chaos, undone by a single opponent weaving a labyrinth of death. Borum began her surgical destruction of the enemy fleet. Every shot was exact, each projectile a scalpel strike that crippled with minimal expenditure. The Ravagers' vaunted warships proved helpless against hypervelocity rounds they could not track or block. The first battlecruiser perished when a penetrator cored its reactor, the explosion tearing 3 escorts apart. Another managed to fire, but its plasma streams struck only empty void as the human vessel spun beyond solutions thought inescapable. Meanwhile, engineer Jin Wu oversaw experimental systems while studying Ravager designs through passive scans. Their technology was immense, but stagnant, built for brute force against victims too terrified to resist. Their hulls were layered against plasma and beam weapons, but left vulnerable to kinetic strikes. Most damning of all, their crews lacked the tactical flexibility born from true adversity. Kavar came to a horrifying realization. He was not battling a ship, but a predator perfected by an environment where failure meant extinction. Every maneuver turned Ravager strength into weakness. Attempts at encirclement collapsed into ambush. Zones. Numerical superiority only created traffic that obstructed their own fire. This was not combat. It was a lesson in predation. Captain Dohyan wielded the Indomitable with mastery, using the planet's gravity as a slingshot to fling the ship through the formation at hull-straining speeds. Each pass left more Ravager wrecks adrift in fire. Young Su and Jin Wu coordinated to breach enemy networks, not just harvesting intelligence, but injecting false orders. Viruses written by human coders spread like digital tumors, scrambling fire controls and corrupting navigation systems. Ships turned on each other in confusion as their commands dissolved into chaos. Below, the Valorans looked on from their burning world, witnessing the impossible. A single human vessel was dismantling an armada that had enslaved dozens of systems. The crystalline people, who had never known war, struggled to grasp what their eyes told them. The Valorans had no frame of reference for such tactical genius. Their entire military tradition revolved around ceremonial guards and maintaining public order. The very concept of war executed with such creativity and ruthless precision was alien to them. Amid the chaos, medic Yunji treated wounded colonists with unshakable focus, her calm efficiency astonishing the crystalline beings. She tended to injuries with clear judgment and steady hands, embodying another trait that set humans apart from much of the galaxy: resolve under fire. Warp Prime. Kavar barked increasingly frantic orders to what remained of his fleet, but his Tats' commands did little to restore order. Nothing in his centuries of conquest had prepared him for an enemy that fought as though being outnumbered was an advantage. The humans displayed neither hesitation nor fear, carving through his forces like predators thinning a herd. The battle shifted when Captain Doyan unveiled the Indomitable's true nature. What had seemed a modest exploration vessel revealed hidden weapons embedded deep within its hull. It was no rescue craft, no courier ship. It was a prototype stealth warship, engineered for solitary operations deep behind enemy lines against impossible odds. Bram armed the vessel's primary weapon system, one so radical it had no equivalent in any galactic tongue. The weapon launched projectiles existing in a state of quantum superposition until impact, rendering defense futile. Even among human scientists, the concept was only theoretical. Yet history had taught humanity that war forged the impossible into reality. 3. Ravager capital ships were annihilated in as many seconds, torn apart by physics-defying munitions. Warp Prime. Kavar stared in disbelief as his proudest flagships disintegrated in bursts of searing light. Panic spread as the remaining ships broke formation and fled, their crews finally understanding what hunted them. These were not exiles, not wandering refugees. They were apex predators from a death world, a species that had evolved to outthink and outfight anything that stalked them. Kavar activated his personal comms, transmitting a final message across every open frequency, a warning to his kind. Humanity had emerged from the quarantine zone around Sol 3. They were no victims. They were hunters, born in hell and shaped by it. As fire and vacuum consumed his flagship, Kavar accepted the truth. The age of easy conquest was over. Somewhere in the void, Deathworlders prowled, and they were terrifyingly good at it. The battlefield above New Valoria became a graveyard of broken ships and smoldering plasma clouds. Dozens of Ravager vessels floated as wreckage, while others burned slow, stubborn flames in the vacuum. From the bridge of his dying command ship, Kavar tried to comprehend how a straightforward conquest had unraveled so utterly. His people had honed warfare across millennia, designing ships, weapons, and strategies to overwhelm all resistance. Their forces were stronger, their crews more disciplined, their firepower unmatched. And yet, one vessel, crewed by beings from a cursed world, was unmaking his entire fleet. Aboard the Indomitable, Captain Dohyan oversaw the final phases of the battle with surgical patience. His crew advanced methodically, stripping away the last of Ravager's strength. The human ship slid through the wreckage-strewn void like a predator among prey, striking without warning and vanishing into the labyrinth of shattered metal. Each attack struck with uncanny precision, evidence of coordination beyond what the Ravagers thought possible. Tammon's reputation spread even among the terrified enemy pilots. His mastery of the Indomitable defied belief as he transformed debris and celestial, bodies alike into tools of war, wielding space itself as both shield and weapon. Tammon turned the environment itself into a weapon. Asteroids became improvised projectiles, gravity wells served as slingshot accelerators, and the planet's magnetic field functioned as a guidance system for maneuvers that defied all conventional physics. From their shelters, the Valorans watched, in awe, as their unlikely saviors demonstrated why the galaxy whispered in fear of Deathworlders. These humans fought with a seamless fusion of instinct and technology no other species could replicate. They moved like predators forged in a crucible where hesitation meant death and mercy guaranteed extinction. Yong-Su had fully infiltrated Ravager networks, twisting their own communications into chaos. False orders spread like a plague, turning the fleet against itself. Warships unleashed fire on allies, formations collapsed, and vessels drifted into deadly collisions. Su's interference was more than disruption. It was weaponized misdirection, reshaping the enemy chain of command into a liability. Warp Prime Kethar attempted to rally his commanders through secure channels, only to find even those compromised. Every directive he issued was intercepted and rewritten by Su before reaching its destination. Orders to retreat were transformed into suicidal charges. Commands to regroup stranded vessels in isolation, leaving them easy prey. Meanwhile, Jin Wu monitored the Indomitable's experimental systems while dissecting captured Ravager technology. Impressive by galactic standards, it nonetheless revealed clear stagnation. Their weapons were brute force, optimized for intimidation, not adaptability. Their defenses had never been tested against weaponry operating on principles outside their science. The engagement had evolved into a living case study of human doctrine, proof that raw firepower meant nothing when faced with tactical brilliance and disruptive innovation. Captain Doyan was not merely winning a battle. He was unraveling the very foundation of Ravager supremacy. Every maneuver, every strike served to demonstrate that their empire's reliance on overwhelming force was a weakness, not a strength. Bo-Ram continued her coldly efficient elimination of high-value targets while cataloging defensive flaws for future conflicts. She identified fatal weaknesses: hulls too rigid, power systems too centralized, and crews too dependent on automation, easily corrupted by human intrusion. On the surface, Medic Yunji worked tirelessly among the wounded. Her composure under fire, her steady hands and unwavering focus inspired awe in the crystalline Valorans. To them, her presence embodied a more unsettling truth about humanity: their ability to function calmly in the midst of terror and destruction. Gradually, the colonists realized their rescue was not what it seemed. The humans were not evacuators or peace brokers. They had not come to negotiate. They had come to annihilate a threat through the calculated application of superior violence. To the Valorans, the distinction was profound. What they saw as the tragedy of war, humans viewed as the natural resolution of conflict. Administrator Moonwaver maintained steady contact with Captain Doyan, providing data and damage reports as requested. Yet even here, the difference was clear. The captain's questions were not about minimizing losses, but maximizing destruction. He wanted to know which enemy ships carried the heaviest weapons, which held senior commanders, and which targets would shatter enemy morale most effectively. Warp Prime Kethar finally understood he was not. They were not facing an ordinary fleet, but a hunting pack evolved to kill prey far larger and more dangerous than themselves. The humans coordinated with an almost instinctive mastery of pack tactics, striking with precision at the decisive moment. They moved as predators who had learned to hunt across 3 dimensions and interstellar distances. The tide of battle shifted completely when the Indomitable unveiled its final secret. What had seemed like a modest exploration vessel deployed, concealed weapons that shattered every known principle of galactic warfare. Energy lances fired quantum superposed projectiles, kinetic cannons hurled matter at relativistic speeds, and defensive fields reflected incoming fire back at its source with amplified force. Yong-Su broadcast a final message to the remnants of the Ravager fleet, transmitted flawlessly in formal Ravager military code, something no human should have known. The transmission listed tactical breakdowns of Ravager weaknesses, precise casualty counts, and even coordinates to hidden supply depots scattered across the sector. The implication was devastating. The humans had not simply destroyed a fleet. They had dissected it while harvesting intelligence on the entirety of Ravager operations. This had not been a rescue nor a defense. It was a reconnaissance in force, combat designed to test humanity's capabilities under real fire. Kethar sent his last warning to High. The silence after the fleet's annihilation struck the Valorans more deeply than any roar of battle. Administrator Veltar Moonwaver stood among the shattered remnants of his colony, watching the last Ravager ships limp toward the system's edge, their hulls battered and their crews broken. Overhead, the Indomitable floated in orbit like a watchful predator, letting the wounded survivors flee into the abyss. Captain Du-hyun made no move to pursue, though his ship could have finished them with ease. Instead, he opened a channel to the colony, calmly requesting permission to land a shuttle for direct contact. The crystalline beings who emerged from their shelters expected to greet warriors exultant from victory, flushed with triumph at destroying impossible odds. Instead, they found quiet professionals for whom the annihilation of an enemy fleet was not glory, but routine. The humans checked gear, logged reports, and moved with the calm precision of workers completing another assignment. In the ruins of the main hall, Captain Du-hyun met Administrator Veltar. The human officer was smaller than expected, lacking the imposing presence the Valorans associated with warriors. He spoke in measured tones, projecting competence without arrogance. His questions were simple, practical: casualty counts, infrastructure losses, rebuilding timelines. The Valoran leader struggled to reconcile beings who could unleash devastation on such a scale and then turn seamlessly to relief and recovery. Du-hyun discussed shipments of medical supplies and construction materials with the same steady composure. He had shown orchestrating the destruction of 200 warships. The contrast was both mesmerizing and terrifying to a people who believed violence and compassion could never coexist. In the colony's cultural center, Medic Yunji established a field hospital, tending to the wounded with techniques so advanced they appeared miraculous to crystalline eyes. Her expertise spanned species she had never even seen before. She adapted human surgical techniques to alien physiology with intuitive precision, working without pause for 18 hours to save lives that would otherwise have been lost. Slowly, the Valorans realized they were witnessing another facet of human nature that set them apart from nearly every galactic species. These beings could shift effortlessly from ruthless combat to compassionate healing, treating both as natural expressions of their existence. Engineer Jin Woo assessed the colony's shattered infrastructure and began repairs using methods that seemed to defy physics itself. Human engineering valued improvisation and adaptability over elegance, turning scrap into function. Within hours, systems the Valorans believed irreparably destroyed were restored to full operation. Administrator Veltar offered everything his people could spare in exchange for lasting protection: crystalline computing advances, priceless art, rare minerals unseen elsewhere in the galaxy. The humans declined with polite explanations that made no sense to the desperate Valoran leader. Captain Du-hyun clarified, this had not been a rescue. It was a live test of human capabilities against genuine opposition. The Indomitable was not humanity's cutting edge, merely an average vessel with a standard crew. If this was routine, the implications for galactic politics were staggering. The Valorans understood they had not witnessed humanity's elite. They had seen a minor skirmish against opponents using obsolete methods. Young Su established links with the wider galactic network, transmitting combat reports to Earth Command. His dispatches contained tactical analyses, recovered Ravager intelligence, and recommendations for human expansion into the sector. To him, first contact was an intelligence operation, not diplomacy. The true shape of humanity's emergence became undeniable when Captain Du-hyun requested detailed maps of Ravager installations. He had no interest in defenses or peace negotiations. He wanted to know where the next hunt could begin. The Valorans realized their rescuers were not protectors of the weak. They were hunters of predators. Tammin conducted reconnaissance flights, through the system, mapping jump points and hazards with effortless skill. To the Valorans, his casual maneuvers were near suicidal. To him, they were second nature, born of a world that demanded three-dimensional thinking as the price of survival. The final revelation came when Veltar asked what humanity wanted in exchange for salvation. Du Huan's answer chilled the crystalline leader to his core. Earth desired nothing from peaceful species, except information. Specifically, information about where to find more monsters like the Ravagers. Humanity had not broken containment to trade or ally. They had grown tired of fighting themselves and were seeking opponents worthy of their skills. The apex predators of Earth had found prey worthy of their interest. As the Indomitable departed New Valoria, Captain Du Hyun sent a message destined to echo through every star system. Humanity was open for business, and their business was hunting those who hunted others. The transmission included specifications, tactical doctrines, and expansion goals that left no room for misunderstanding. The age of easy conquest was over. Predators who preyed on the innocent would now face hunters evolved to kill predators themselves. Warp Prime. Kethar's last warning had already raced across Ravager space and beyond. Rumors of beings from Sol 3 who fought like demons, of a single human ship dismantling an entire fleet of weapons and tactics incomprehensible to galactic science. The Valorans watched the Indomitable vanish into hyperspace, struggling to comprehend what they had seen. They had been saved, but by beings more terrifying than their enemies. Humanity treated violence not as evil, but as a tool. Their civilization would endure, but the galaxy itself would never be the same. Somewhere in the void, the Deathworlders, spread beyond their cradle, carrying weapons built to kill entities that never imagined themselves prey. The monsters who had terrorized the stars were about to learn the meaning of being hunted by creatures very, very good at it. The age of humanity had begun, and soon the galaxy would learn to fear the sound of human laughter in the void.